Hello, everyone. Good morning. We're just going to give it a few seconds so everyone can join. And in the meantime, I just want to let you know that this webinar will be recorded and everyone will be receiving a copy of the presentation in their email. Additionally, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the Q&A and our presenters will be answering them at the end. Today, we are joined by the EDC South Miami, the Economic Development Council of South Miami, who are going to be giving a very insightful presentation about legal considerations that you should be taking into account when starting a small business. So I leave the floor to Gary and our partners from EDC.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I see that there's still a few people filing in. I'm Jerry Grimes-Lewis, Executive Director of the EDC of South Miami-Dade. And with me is Ebony. She is the real brains behind the operation. She makes everything tick. We are a very small organization, the EDC. Our coverage area is Kendall Drive and South, although as far as the Navigator program, there's not real boundaries. We can assist anyone. But our mission is to support anything that enhances and supports economic growth in South Miami-Dade. And that could be workforce development, small business engagement. It could be a number of different things. And that's what we do. We are a very small team of 3 with a board of directors. And we like to say that we're small but mighty. You're here today because of the Miami-Dade Business Navigator program. And I wanted to just take a moment and tell you a little bit about that. It was funded through the SBA, and there is a hub, which is FIU, and then there's 6 spokes. The reason for this is each spoke has an area that they're of expertise. So when you're starting a business or you own a business and you have a question and you Google it, you get like millions of answers. So to kind of funnel that down for you, we do an initial interview and we assess really what is it that you need? Where are you going? What do you want? And then we can refer you to the proper spoke. So it's a great program. It does end November 30th, but our care will not end November 30th. We're going to continue to work with our clients to bring them to success. So it was established by the American Rescue Plan. I talked to you about the hubs and the spokes, and we were only 51 grantees. So that's really saying something about FIU and the work that they do. And we were quite honored to be asked to be a partner. The goal, as you can see, aligns with the EDCs. It's to improve long-term economic recovery and resilience. And then we do focus on veterans, women, socially and economically disadvantaged, but our services are open to all. These are the branches we were talking about: Ascendus, Miami-Dade Chamber branches, Prospera, Small Business Development at FIU, ourselves, and Startup FIU Procurement. And we've all been working together on this for, we're ending year 2. So we got a good feel for what people need and who's the best person to direct them to. Coalition of partners secured $2.5 million via CMPP to create the program for Miami-Dade businesses. And our focus, again, is to create a strong local community navigator network. And like, you have the gift of our experience. Had you been here at the beginning 2 years ago, I might have taken a little longer to figure out who we need to refer you to, but we've pretty much got it down to a science now. This is our contact information, and everyone will be receiving, in case you missed it at the beginning, a copy of this presentation after it's over. Just any questions, put it in the Q&A, and if we don't answer it along the way, we'll certainly come back to it at the end. And with that, I would like to introduce Wendy Wilson. She is from Miami-Dade Legal Services. Did I say that right?
Legal
Okay.
Services of Greater Miami, Inc., but close
Thank you.
enough.
And she's here today. There's not going to be legal advice. I don't want to, anyone to think that, but really good frames of reference, things that you can do and should do if you're a business owner or thinking about a business. So with that, Wendy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you for that nice introduction. And let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen. It's going to stop others. Okay, give me just a moment. Share. There we go. Okay, so our presentation is legal considerations for starting a small business. And as Jerry said, I'm with Legal Services of Greater Miami, Inc., and we participate in a statewide project with other legal aid organizations called Florida Community Development Legal Project, where we work with small businesses that are owned by low-income individuals, as well as nonprofits that are serving low-income communities. Okay, let me bear with me while I try and advance the slides. There we go. As Jerry said, this is not legal advice. This is the disclaimer that we lawyers have to give all of the time when we're making, general public presentations, because we're not your lawyer. And so we can't give you legal advice that is specific to your own situation. But this is just a general overview of legal considerations for small businesses. It's not exhaustive. We don't go into every detail about owning a small business. And if you do have any legal questions yourself, you would need to consult with or retain your own attorney. So with all that, mumbo jumbo being said, I'll move on. So I explained a little bit about our Florida Community Development Legal Project, and you, of course, are welcome to apply online through our website, which the link will be at the end of the presentation. But like I said, our services are basically, we're only allowed to assist, businesses that are owned by individuals that are pretty low income. The income thresholds that we currently have for our funding are low. We're always searching for new funding so that we can assist entrepreneurs at higher income levels. But right now we don't have that option. But I just wanted to start with some initial startup considerations for your business. For those of you that are thinking about starting businesses or that are in the early stages, and it's that you need to plan, and plan some more. You always need a business plan. It's basically like the step-by-step plan for what you're going to do with your business. You need that to help guide you in the actions that you're going to be taking. And also it's going to be really critical in terms of obtaining funding for your business. Because if you don't have a plan, a really solid plan setting forth the steps for what you're going to do for your business, no one's really going to be that interested in investing in it. Because if you haven't put pencil to paper, they're not likely to give you, a check for your business. So you need to think about the name, the name for your business. That's going to be your brand. So you want to have a really good name, and you want to make sure it's not a name that some other business has, so that you have some trademark considerations. And then so the first thing that you want to keep in mind in terms of legal considerations when you're starting a business is you want to determine your business structure. And I'll go into that a little bit more. You're going to need the appropriate internal operating agreement, which will depend upon business structure that you select. You need to think about the registrations and licenses and permits that are necessary for your particular business. Then you need to think about what sort of contracts do you need for your business. I think. So let's start now with, I think we've talked enough about the business plan, and you've probably learned through various business courses and other trainings that you've taken about how to develop a business plan. But let's talk about the name. You need to make sure that your name is available and not in use or trademarked by another business. And the easiest way to do that is in Florida, you want to start with sunbiz.org, which is the website offered by the Florida Secretary of State, which lists, all of the Florida businesses. So, if you picked a name, type it in Sunbiz and see if somebody else has that same name. If it's exactly the same, then they're not going to allow you to set up your business with the exact same name. But if it's slightly different, you still need to consider whether or not the name has been trademarked. And so one of the easiest ways to do that is just simply a Google search. See if somebody else is using that name and where they are. Are they in Oregon and using that name? Or do they have that same name, but it's a completely different type of business? And then, you may want to, you can check the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office website and just see if the name has, if you really want to be thorough, just to see if the name has actually been registered for a trademark. You don't want to use a trademark name because then you could wind up in a lawsuit for infringement, and that is just really not pleasant. It can be very expensive. The type of business structure selected can affect the business name. For example, corporations have to include something that indicates that it's a corporation, i.e. Corp, Corporation, Inc., Incorporated. And then LLCs or limited liability companies either have to include LLC in the name or limited liability company. One thing to keep in mind that just because you file your articles of incorporation or your articles of organization with the Florida Department of State and under a particular name, that is not a trademark registration, and that does not protect your name. That is a completely separate process. So just keep that in mind, that just because you registered it in Florida with by filing your articles of incorporation, that is not the same thing as a trademark registration. And that can be done on a state or federal level, and we can discuss that a little more as we go on the presentation. So determining your business structure. These are the basic business entities that you can have in the state of Florida. And we've got the sole proprietor. That is where it's just you operating your business under your name. It doesn't require incorporation or any registration with the state. It's owned by one single individual. So there's no distinction between the individual and the business. So there's personal liability for all of the business debts because you've entered into everything under your own personal name. We usually don't recommend this just because of the personal liability issues, but some people still just prefer to do that. Now, if you're using a different name for your business, but you still haven't registered it with an official legal entity, then you as the sole proprietor would need to register a fictitious name with the state of Florida. This is also referred to as a doing business as or a DBA. So for example, if your name is, John Smith, then, and you're going to operate a barber shop, it needs to be John Smith Barbershop or John Smith Haircuts or something like that, but it needs to have your name in it. But if you're not going to use your name and you want to call it, I don't know, something catchy like, Good Looks Hair Salon or something like that, then you would need to file a fictitious name registration with the Secretary of State. Another form of business entity that would require filing with the Florida Secretary of State is a limited liability company. And that's one of the most popular forms of business entity because it provides a separate legal entity from the owners. The owners would be called members, and this affords more liability protection for the owner. The business itself, the entity itself, is what's liable for business debts or judgments or things like that. You can have a single member, i.e. one person, or a multi-member LLC, and it can be member managed or manager managed. You could appoint, when you say it's member managed, that would mean that one or more of the members actually manage the LLC. If it's manager managed, maybe you appoint a completely different individual to run the company or a completely different company to act as the manager of the LLC. And LLCs exist based on, Florida state law. And for your reference, that would be Chapter 605 of the Florida statutes, and it's called the Revised Florida Limited Liability Company Act. And the way to set up an LLC is very simple. You can do it online, electronically. You would just go on Sunbiz and you would file articles of organization, and basically the website just takes you through, asks you different questions, and then turns the answers to those questions into your articles of organization. You could also, prepare articles of organization on paper and mail those in for filing, or, take them into Tallahassee for filing. But most people just prefer to do it electronically online using a credit card. And then once you've filed your articles of organization, every year thereafter, you have to file an annual report to remain active and in good standing with the state of Florida. Another form of legal entity is a partnership. And basically that's when two or more people carry on a business as co-owners. It's similar to a sole proprietor, except you've got more than one person. This type of arrangement and the details of your partnership should be memorialized in a partnership agreement. Otherwise it's one person's word against the other, and you never want to be in that situation. So if you're going to enter into a partnership with someone, you really need to put it in writing. In the absence of a partnership agreement, the provisions of the Florida statutes are going to determine what the terms of your arrangement is. And that's Chapter 620 of the Florida statutes. And the terms of the statute may not be what you intended and what you agreed verbally with your other partners. So again, I can't say this enough, put it in writing. Finally, the last of the more common business entities is a corporation. And the owners of a corporation are referred to as shareholders. And while a corporation is certainly a fine A legal entity, it has a lot more formalities than, say, a limited liability company. That's why a lot of people choose the limited liability company, because of the informal structure. For instance, according to the Florida statutes, you have to meet at least once a year. You have to keep minutes of your meetings and minutes of major decisions. And you have to have a board of directors that makes the corporate decisions. Even if it's just one or two people serving on the board of directors, it's still the board of directors that's making the decision, not the shareholder or shareholders. And the way to set up a corporation is you register with the Department of State. Again, you can do this electronically on Sunbiz by filing articles of incorporation. The online process will ask you questions. As you fill in your answers, it will formulate your articles of incorporation, or you can, prepare your own on paper and send them in for filing. And then, just like with an LLC, you're going to have to file an annual report every year to remain active. There's some other less common business structures that I'm just going to mention, but I'm not going to go into any real detail on them. And those include limited partnerships, limited liability partnerships, professional associations, professional corporations, and professional limited liability companies. And usually the ones with the professional name in them, they're used by individuals or groups of individuals in professions such as, doctors, lawyers, engineers, that type of thing. A lot of times the limited partnerships, or the LPs, they're used in connection with complex real estate transactions because there's some tax benefits to the limited partnership structure. And then I've already discussed how the professional associations, they're all used by businesses providing professional services. So something that's very important when you're operating your business is, and particularly when you have a corporation or an LLC and you really want that liability protection, is you have to keep the business separate from your personal affairs, and you need to follow the formalities required by the statute. So for one thing, you need separate bank accounts. You should not be running your business expenses through your personal bank account, and you should not be running your personal expenses through your business bank account. You need separate contracts, separate records. You really need to keep the business separate from your, personal thing. Because otherwise, if you don't do this and you're just running everything through one bank account, then you are going to lose the liability protection for the legal entity, because it just looks like, it's just your own personal slush fund. It's not a legitimate business. The assets of the business should be considered separate from personal assets. You shouldn't use them as if they were individual assets. You shouldn't buy, like, for example, buy a house in the name of the business and then live in it, because, that just looks like, you're not treating the business asset as separate from an individual asset. You need to make sure that your business is adequately capitalized to cover your reasonable liabilities and your normal operating cost. This is why a business plan is critical, because there can be personal liability despite the fact that you selected a corporation or an LLC if you undercapitalize your business, because again, it doesn't look like a legitimate business structure. It just looks like, a personal slush fund. You need to have the appropriate internal operating document. For an LLC, that would be an operating agreement. For a corporation, it would be bylaws. And for a limited partner, a partnership, it would be a partnership agreement. Any meetings that you have and should be documented, and you should keep your active status with the Secretary of State. That means filing your annual report every year on time so that you have your active status. Otherwise, if you're acting while you're inactive, that again could lead to some personal liability. So just document all your business activities and keep adequate records and store them appropriately. So as I mentioned before, your internal operating documents, a corporation has bylaws and LLCs have operating agreements. And the purpose of these agreements are to detail the operational and financial management of the business entity. Now, these documents are not filed with the Secretary of State. They're not public documents, but they're very important to have. Again, like I said before, particularly when you have more than one member in your LLC or more than one shareholder, whatever your deal is with your other business partners, whether, shareholders, etc., you want to have that documented, because otherwise, if it's not written down, then the terms of the applicable statute are going to apply, and that may not be what you intended. Now, even though I said it's not a public document, sometimes it's requested by the bank when you're opening a bank account. The bank is going to want to see your bylaws or your operating agreement. A lender is definitely going to want to see it. So it's important to have, and even if you're the sole member of the LLC, it's one of those formalities that I previously mentioned that make it look like this is a legitimate business. And that you're following all of the formalities. So even if you are a single member LLC or you're the sole shareholder and director of your corporation, you should still have bylaws or an operating agreement. And examples of some of the provisions that would be in either of these documents would be, contributions of capital. Who has contributed what? How are the profits and losses going to be distributed and when? Voting rights, how the business is actually going to be managed, who makes what decisions, how disputes are handled, and then succession planning. What happens if a member of the LLC or corporation becomes disabled or passes? What happens to the business then? That's all, something that's important to put in your document. I'm going to go over some common filings for small businesses that you should keep in mind that, may be applicable to you. So applying for an EIN number. You need to have an EIN number for your business. And this can be accomplished electronically through the Internal Revenue Service's website. Word to the wise, there are a lot of websites that look like they're the IRS website, but are not, and they charge you, $35, $40, $50 to get an EIN number for you. Whereas if you go to the actual IRS website, which is irs.gov, then there's no charge for obtaining your EIN number. But a lot of times people they get onto one of these other sites, and like I said, they look very much like the IRS website. And then you go through the whole process, you filled everything out, and then suddenly it's, please input your credit card number, and you realize that you're on the wrong website. If you have a tax professional, that's going to be, and I highly recommend getting one for your business, whether that's a CPA or an attorney, but certainly a CPA is good to have on your team. They can assist you with this process as well. So the articles we've already talked about. Amendments. If you ever make any changes to your articles, they need to be documented, and those amendments would be filed with the Secretary of State's office. Sometimes those can be filed electronically, but generally they have to be sent in, by mail or hand delivery. And keep in mind that SunBiz is is a public reference. So your articles and any amendments to your articles, whether they're articles of incorporation or articles of organization, those are public documents. So anybody can look up your articles and see in your annual reports and see who's involved with the business. They can read your articles. Usually the articles, they're not that detailed, so that's not that harmful. It's not really a privacy violation. The meat of how your business is operated is going to be either in your in your operating agreement or your bylaws. And like I said, those are not, generally publicly available. Business tax receipt is something that really every business is going to need to file. And it used to be called the occupational license. And it's generally required for every location where the business operates. So you need to check with both the county and any municipality where your business is located. For example, if you're in Cutler Bay, you need to check with Miami-Dade County as well as Cutler Bay and see what you need to, if you need to file a business tax receipt. If you are in unincorporated Miami-Dade County, well, then it would just be the county. But it seems like these days, most of the county is incorporated. So just be very careful about that. And if you've got 2 or more locations, say you've got a Miami Gardens location and, you've got one down south in Cutler Bay or Homestead, you're going to need to check with both of those jurisdictions as well as the county. The annual report I've mentioned before has to be filed every year with the Secretary of State's office. It can be done electronically on SunBiz. And the whole purpose is just to update the state and consumers regarding any changes or lack of changes to information in your articles, whether they're articles of incorporation or articles of organization. As of now, and for, the past, I don't know how many years, it's always been due on May 1st. And that is a drop dead deadline. If you have not filed it by May 1st, then you're going to be late. And there is a non-negotiable late fee, which is currently $400. They don't care what your excuse is. You're going to have to pay $400 if you file it on May 2nd or after. If you fail to file your annual report, then by mid-September, you will be administratively dissolved by the state of Florida. And that's not a good thing. That means, from a legal standpoint, your business is, completely inactive. I had mentioned before the fictitious name filing, that's also known as the DBA, or doing business as. So if you're doing business under any other name than the registered name or the individual's name, for sole proprietors, you're going to need to register a fictitious name. So even if you have an LLC or a corporation and it's called, Happy Hair Salon or something like that, if you decide to change the name of your salon and call it something else, then that would be a fictitious name, because you would be, operating under this name that is not Happy Hair Salon, Inc. So you would need to file the fictitious name registration. Before registering that, you do have to advertise in a county newspaper. So that could be the Miami Herald or the Daily Business Report or the Miami Times, one of the business newspapers. And then your fictitious name needs to be renewed every 5 years. Or you can just, cancel it and it can be re-registered if there's a change in the business ownership. Some additional filings for small businesses could be with the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, where the particular business may require a license, i.e., hair salons, massage businesses, construction, certain types of medical providers. And then sometimes people affiliated with the business also have to be separately licensed. You're going to need to file with the Florida Department of Revenue. If you're going to have employees or even, independent contractors, you're going to have to make filings with the Department of Revenue. If you're a retail business, then you're going to have, sales tax issues. So you'll need that registration. You need to report newly hired and rehired employees and then independent contractors earning more than a certain amount per calendar year, which is, pretty low, basically, $600 per calendar year. So if you're, trying to save money by hiring somebody as an independent contractor or a 1099, you're still going to have to make a filing with the Department of Revenue. And we'll talk more about, the distinctions between employees and independent contractors and how important it is to get that correct. You may have other tax filings for your business. Again, that's why you should consult with a tax professional, like whether or not you are going to have a corporate income tax return. So having a CPA on your team and working with them is important. Also, just to make sure you get, your tax returns done properly. So, to report on your own personal returns. You may need to file with the Florida Department of Financial Services, the Division of Workers' Compensation. And this provides employer coverage based on the type of industry, the number of employees, and the entity organization. Workers' comp is required for all Florida businesses with 4 or more employees, regardless of whether they're full or part-time. And if you're involved in the construction industry, construction businesses have to have coverage for every employee. And then if you want to get more information about this, it's all available on the state of Florida's official business information portal, openbyfloridabusiness.gov. That website is a wealth of information. Business contracts. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of putting an agreement in writing. I said this before when it came to the bylaws and your operating agreement, particularly when there's multiple members or shareholders of a business. And it certainly comes into play whenever you enter into a contract for your business with another person or another business. Small errors can have very big consequences when things do not go as planned. Someone leaves the business, there's litigation, and it doesn't matter what you all said or what you really meant to say or what you meant by what you said. The terms of the written agreement are what will govern. And if it's just a verbal agreement, it's going to be your word against the other person's, and that can really work to your detriment. So some examples of contracts that should always be in writing, your commercial lease agreement for your business establishment, property and equipment lease agreements. If you're renting a one of those high-speed copiers for your business, or you're renting forklifts or something of that nature. Real estate acquisition agreements, asset purchase agreements, contractor or subcontractor agreements, maintenance agreements, vendor agreements, non-disclosure agreements, which you may use for the protection of your confidential information. That would be something that you may want to get before you discuss business and the details of your business or your finances. You may want to have a non-disclosure before you do that. And, non-competes, those are rapidly falling out of favor, but people still have them. And that's basically everything that I wanted to cover in this quick, this time that we have. Are there any questions in the chat that I could answer, generally? Is someone monitoring the chat?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So let's just start at the top.
Okay.
We have a question, Avi. How is this related to NJSBA? Is that New Jersey, Avi?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a question for Jerry.
Yeah. So if you are from another place, oh, I see that. Okay, I'm sorry. Jesus answered it. Let me go down to the next one. What if I have a Delaware registered LLC and I'm doing business in Florida? Do I need to register in Florida?
Again, it depends, but it's a very good idea, yes, to just register to do business in Florida, particularly if you're doing most of your business in Florida.
Okay. I would also recommend local business tax in whatever cities that you're in. It's a necessity as well. I am interested to learn more about LLC business structure, but filing as an S Corp. Could we talk about that?
Yes, that's a good question. So subchapter S, a subchapter S corporation is not a separate type of corporation. You don't file an S corporation. It's not a specific legal entity. It is a tax designation. So a corporation can elect S Corp designation, and an LLC can elect to be taxed as an S Corp. And basically what that means is that, there's some requirements, like for instance, you can't have more than 100 shareholders. Generally, everyone involved has to be a legal US resident or a citizen. But basically what it means when you elect S Corp status, that means that certain number, some of the distribution, some of the money that you're going to be paying yourself and your other members or shareholders will be deemed a salary, which would be subject to employment tax, and anything in excess of a reasonable salary can be deemed a distribution, which is not subject to income tax. Employment tax, still subject to income tax. And you may all know that whenever you are self-employed, the business pays 7.5% of the unemployment tax. That would be, the FICA, the Social Security, that, and then the employee pays that. But when you're so if you have a job with another business, you're only paying the 7.5% on your salary, and your employer pays the 7.5%. But when you're self-employed, you pay the full 15%. So if you elect the S corporation status, and that's done by filing a separate document with the IRS, basically it means that a portion of what you're going to be getting back from the business will be deemed salary, and you will pay the full 15% on that amount. But then anything in excess of that would not be subject to that 15%. Now, you have to be making a certain amount of money for it to really make sense for you. And that number can vary depending on your personal situation. So that's something you would want to check with your CPA about, and discuss your own personal situation and your total household income to see when does it make sense for you to file. It's not necessarily something that you just want to go out and automatically do from the beginning before you've even started making any money, or only making a very small amount of money. So check with your CPA about that, but that's what that means.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Someone asked if an S corp needs a board of directors.
Yes, like I just said, S corp is not a legal entity, it's a tax designation. So if you are a corporation that filed for S corp status, then yes, you need a board of directors. If you are an LLC that filed a request to be treated as an S corp, then no, you don't need a board of directors because you're an LLC.
That's great to know. We do have someone in the audience that's asking about professional limited liability insurance. And I'm not sure because he says he's a registered representative in the finance industry. Do I need to file professional limited liability or just the LLC? I don't know about contracts needed for Airbnb. That's really, specific, but, and Wendy, tell me if I'm wrong, but I too own a small business and I've had professional liability like from the beginning. It's inexpensive and, in my opinion, very necessary if you're consulting.
Right. And it wasn't clear to me if they were asking about insurance or if they wanted to be, whether they should consider having a PLLC, professional limited liability company. And that's just a decision that you can make. It's just the question of, do you want to be, whatever you would name your business, LLC, or do you want it to be PLLC? So you would probably want to check with, a CPA or your own attorney about that, because I don't know what your specific situation is. But, sometimes people like the prestige of a PLLC. And if I were to set up my own business as a independent attorney, I would probably pick PLLC as opposed to just an LLC. But, that's just me. But if that was not the question, it was a question about getting, liability, professional liability insurance, I would say no matter what your business is, get insurance. That's very important to protect your business and yourself in the event, that you are found liable for your, business obligations. Maybe you didn't follow all of the formalities, or maybe you didn't adequately capitalize your company, and you could still be liable for something that happened with the business.
Okay. I just have like a couple more.
Okay.
Do you need a business plan if you're purchasing an established business or a franchise?
Well, I would still say yes. And remember, a business plan is not a legal requirement, but if you're purchasing an established business, you probably, you may have your own ideas about what you're going to do with the business, where you want to take the business in the next, year, 3 years, etc. Things that you're going to change. It's probably less necessary in a franchise situation because you've already got some very strict requirements for what you can do, but it never hurts to have your own personal plan. Like how do you want to grow this business? How do you think you can grow this business, even if it's a franchise? What sort of marketing do you want to do? How rapidly are you going to hire new employees? It's always good to have a business plan. Now, Jared,
Percentage wise, your goals that are written down are much easier to attain. And that's kind of what a business plan is to me, like a map of,
right.
So yeah, it's not a legal requirement, but it is a really good idea. Okay, we probably covered this, but are there asset protection issues with filing a single member LLC in the state of Florida? Is there a way to get more asset protection comparable to a multi-member LLC in the state of Florida by filing a single member LLC in Florida?
That is one of the I would say the detriments of an LLC, a single member LLC, is that it if there is a creditor that obtains a judgment against the business, they can get a charging order and they can basically take over the business. That's provided for in the statute. Wow. And so a single member LLC has less protections than a multi-member LLC, because in that case, if there's a creditor that gets a judgment against an individual member of the LLC, let's say, you're running a business and it's a multi-member LLC, and John Doe, part of the LLC, gets a judgment against him from Holy Cross Hospital. Well, if he's a member of a multi-member LLC, all Holy Cross can do is get a charging order, which means that Holy Cross would be entitled to any distributions for John Doe from the LLC. But if John Doe had a single member LLC and Holy Cross got a judgment against him, well, then Holy Cross could basically take over the business because there's no other members. Now, keep in mind, there's a difference between a creditor of the business versus individual creditors from outside the business. Certainly, if someone gets a judgment against the business, then they're going to collect against the business assets, which could be if they it doesn't really matter if it's a multi-member or single member at that point. But what we're referring to in terms of asset protection is when it's a judgment unrelated to the business, like your hospital bills, your credit card bills, your car, that type of thing. Did that make sense, or is there a follow-up to that?
That was in the Q&A. And I don't have a name. It's from an anonymous attendee. So if you're still here and still listening, if you could just put in the chat if we answered your question to your satisfaction. I do want to remind everyone that tomorrow we have financing your business. And so there's a link in the chat. for everybody to sign up for that. This has been a great run of webinars, from AI to the legal considerations. It just really, it's a wealth of information all in one place. Spend a little time with us tomorrow, and we'll talk about money. If no one has any other questions for Wendy, I want to be respectful of her time as well as the audience. So I'm going to close it. Everyone will get a copy. And I did have someone ask if there was a list of attorneys they could contact to get advice. So legalservicesmiami.org is a part. You'll have that information here in the presentation when you receive it. And I would start there. Oh, now I have
Jerry, if I could, the best place for them to, if they were interested in seeing if they qualified for our services, would be the flcommunitydevelopment.org website. And they can apply online right there. And then we can see if you qualify for our services, or we could refer you, if you don't qualify for our services, then we would refer you to the Miami-Dade County Bar Association. They have a lawyer referral service. We would suggest that you can start there, and they can refer you to an attorney that handles business type issues, whether it's a startup of your business or a particular contract issue or a litigation issue or whatever it is. Jerry, did you have a question about Airbnb? Did I hear you mention?
Yeah, that's I wasn't sure about that one. Let me find it. What contracts are needed for Airbnb? I'm assuming they have, like multiple properties that they Airbnb out.
Okay, well, I mean, just for starters, I mean, it's not really that you can negotiate much with that, but you're going to have your contract with Airbnb or VRBO or whichever entity that you list your properties with. You should be aware of, like I said, it's probably not a lot of negotiation, if any, with those companies, but you should at least have someone go through it with you so that you understand what you're getting into. Like, how can you terminate, and what happens if there is a dispute, and that, what are your remedies, that type of thing. You may have contracts with your cleaning service or your maintenance service, or who runs it for you. If you don't personally manage it, maybe you have a management company, so there would be a contract with your management company. And obviously, and when you acquire the properties, you're going to have a purchase agreement, and that whole real estate transaction. And then if you've got, again, if you're an LLC or a corporation and you've got other members or shareholders, you really need to have your bylaws and your operating agreement be very detailed about the financial arrangement between the other members.
Wow. Awesome. Okay, and last question, I promise. The anonymous attendee did have a follow-up question. So just to make sure, the issue with the single member LLC limitation with asset protection is that the non-business creditors can also take over the business of the single member LLC.
Yes.
Perfect. You have all of our contact information. Please do not hesitate to reach out. If we don't have the answer, we'll certainly find someone who does for you. If you haven't registered for the program already, in the presentation is a QR code. Please sign up for business counseling, and let's go out there and make some money, guys. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Wendy, Jesus.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, so much. Diana, great job. Really appreciate you guys. So hopefully we'll see you tomorrow for the financing one. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.